Hello, my name is Michael Labbott, and today I want to talk about a few things that happened last week, because whilst every week when I post these videos I tend to think, well, there won't be anything more to talk about next week. There's always a whole flood of stuff, and there's been quite a lot that's happened this week. Beginning of the week, our Prime Minister, the ever-smiling and nodding Rishi Sunak, went off to Scotland to announce that he's going to grant 100 licenses to drill for oil in the North Sea. Before he went, he was interviewed from when he was in Dowden, he was from Scotland, by a guy called Martin Geisler, and it was an interview of 5 minutes that was always prepared to grant for that whole day, and it was rather rushed. But at the end of the interview, this Martin Geisler, he said to Sunak, he said, "How are you getting up here?" And Sunak said, "Well, I'm flying," and he was clearly irritated. He went straight on to say, and I'll quote what he said. He said, "If you or others think that the answer to climate change is getting people to ban everything that they're doing just to stop people going on holiday, I think that's absolutely the wrong approach." You know, he didn't do public transport. There are plenty of flights from London to Aberdeen. What it costs to send that huge plane to Scotland for a photo opportunity, really, and a quick speech, you can't imagine. But we're all paying, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, this guy, as I say, he doesn't do public transport. He does helicopters and planes. I don't suppose he's ever been on a train or a bus. I'm sure he hasn't been on a bus, apart from for a photo opportunity, perhaps. And the next day he appeared on LBC with Nick Ferrari, answering calls from listeners who were calling in. And I just wanted to quote some of the things he said during the course of this phone-in. Someone phoned in from his constituency, said that a lot of businesses were closing, mentioned several businesses within the constituency, and he just shrugged that off. He said, I go around the country, he said, people are telling me that business is very good and football is up. I mean, this is the Prime Minister. He's supposed to know what's going on in the country. Everybody can see that business is doing badly, that football is down everywhere because nobody's got any money. But he says, no. He says, anyway, businesses come and go. So business go bust, bad luck, they'll start some new ones. I was thinking back, actually, how Mrs. Thatcher was the last Prime Minister who really was concerned about small business. She was always on about it, and she understood the vital importance to any economy of small businesses, because small businesses become large businesses. There's no large business in the world that did start as a small business, and they're so vital, but obviously to him have no consequence whatsoever. And he then went on to talk about the oil licenses and so on, and his attitude towards global warming. He said we should not take any lectures from anybody about our record. Our record is fantastic. It's better than everyone else's. And is this constantly pumping out this rubbish? You're just lying. I mean, this guy lies as much as, well, not quite as much, but he lies almost as much as Johnson. It's just now acceptable. You just lie, and hope that stupid people, will believe it all. Then he went on about inflation. Here again, another lie. He says, if we bring inflation down, people will have more money in their pockets. It's a complete and utter lie. Inflation is prices going up. If you make them go up less quickly, that doesn't put any money in anybody's pocket. Then he went on about the oil. He was asked about the oil, and he said it was better to have local oil than depend on Putin. Now, this is the line they're putting out, and I've heard him say this several times since, and again, it's just so absolutely dishonest. The way it works is that we will grant licenses to companies to drill for oil in the North Sea. Once they've bought these licenses, any oil that they extract is theirs, provided they pay the taxes and so on. It's their oil. We have sold the licenses for them to drill for the oil and to sell it, and they can sell it on the open market. And these licenses, they'll be auctioned, and it's every chance Chinese companies will come buying it. Could be companies from all over the world will buy it, and they can then sell it wherever they like. They have no obligation whatsoever to sell it to us. So the fact that it's being drilled 50 miles off the Scottish coast means nothing. And then he says, this will generate taxes for the NHS. Not for anything else, NHS. So everybody says, oh, if it's for the NHS, it's fine in that case. Yeah, well, no, go ahead. Just like, there's a benefit there, it's just for the NHS. Then he says, this is actually quotes from his phone-in with Nick Ferrari. If not from the North Sea, we have to ship it around the world, which is bad for the environment. That's true. 2.5 weeks ago, Kemi Badenoch was in New Zealand signing a deal with 11 of the countries the most furthest away from the UK as you can possibly get for us to buy and sell them goods, the other side of the world. And he's now claiming that if we get oil from the North Sea, it'll mean we won't damage the environment by shipping it all around the world. As I think I might have mentioned last week, I bought some onions from New Zealand in my local supermarket. I mean, the whole madness of turning our backs on the EU, which is 22 miles away, and then decided to buy from countries as far away as you can possibly get, is crazy. Someone else, finally, in this interview, somebody else said something about a lot of doctors and nurses were leaving, emigrating to New Zealand and Australia, and he just brushed it off. He said, well, that's there are not very many of them doing that. And I don't know, I just think that, I mean, this guy, he's an accountant. But it's as I said last week, I think, he's a son of immigrants, as are so many people at the top of government, Patel and Braverman and Badenoch, Zahawi, Kwarteng, all these people right at the top of government, who are changing our society so much. I remember, throughout my lifetime, really, I grew up in the 60s and so on, and throughout my lifetime, everything's got better and freer and more liberal, and we've become a much more friendly, welcoming country, and our interaction with foreigners has always been it's been for our benefit. But now with this lot in charge, all they want to do is just clamp down on everything. They want to keep foreigners out. That is the absolute obsession, to keep foreigners out, whatever. They hate foreigners. They hate immigrants. They hate lefty lawyers. They hate anybody who's even remotely liberal. And all they want to do is just clamp down on everything. Clamp down on free speech, clamping down on, you can't go on demonstrations. They want to control people's voting. They want to stop people, they brought in voter ID. They've given the police powers to do whatever they like in terms of stopping and searching and arresting people. It's this authoritarian nation that these people want. They're changing the character of the country, and Sunak's right at the top of it. And I mean, he's not a nice man. He's extremely arrogant. He's vain. He's not a nice man. He's, as I said last week, his life experience is so different from anything the rest of us experience, almost all of us have experienced. How can he possibly understand how people are struggling when he's so wealthy and so removed, when he has so little contact? He's tetchy. He's bad-tempered. He's not a nice man. He's not a good man to be running this country. Now, as far as what else happened last week, and again, just to show you, just an illustration of just what a lousy government we've got. Our Deputy Prime Minister is now Acting Prime Minister Oliver Dowden. You just listen to this man, just look at him. Just hopeless. It was put to him that on the Today programme the other day that the fire services had said that this prison ship, the Bibby Stockholm, whatever it is, the prison ship is a fire hazard. It's a floating Grenfell, and that it's just not safe. His response was, as you probably heard, he said this was politically motivated. They give money to the Labour Party, so they would say that, wouldn't they? So what do they do now, the government? Do they put people on there knowing that it's a fire hazard? and risk the absolute catastrophe if anything happens, if there is a fire, or do they not use it, in which case it'd be another failure, another Braverman fiasco. And a lot of these ministers, these governments, are millionaires, worth a fortune, a lot of them. Take Mel Stride, for example, the Minister for Work and Pensions. He's worth a few million. What did he say last week? People are struggling. Old people are struggling. Could deliver pizzas? What, am I supposed to go and get a bike and deliver pizzas? They're all telling us, we should hold our nerve. Hold our nerve. Got a few million in the bank and 3 or 4 houses. You can hold your nerve much easier than if you're worried about how you're going to pay the groceries next week. And look at other things last week. Look at the import controls. For the 5th time, they've delayed import controls. They've done this, they say, because the ministers say it might be inflationary. Well, of course it's going to be inflationary. It's going to be inflationary because, as I've said so many times before, once we have import controls, European food producers are not going to be much bothered about coming to the UK. The drivers don't want to come here because of the delays. The lorry owners don't want to come here because their lorries are tied up too much time waiting around for documentation and so on. And the food producers, if things sell elsewhere in the EU, why should they bother with the UK? So the only way they're going to come here is by charging a lot more money and making a lot more profit. So it's going to be inflationary. Of course it's going to be inflationary, and it's going to lead to great food shortages. But now this is the 5th time. And you know what? I think what the plan really is here now, I would imagine, is that they're going to hope that they can keep delaying. And it's a legal obligation. I mean, it's a WTO obligation that we should introduce import controls, because otherwise we're giving unfair advantage to EU suppliers over suppliers from other parts of the world. But the idea, I think, is to just keep it going until the election, and then it'll be Labour's problem. And so Labour will come in, and the first thing they'll have to do is impose these import controls, and then there'll be absolute chaos. And of course it damages our British farming, doesn't it? Because, if a British farmer wants to sell something to the EU, they've got endless paperwork. A French farmer wants to sell something in the UK, do it, put it on the lorry, send it through. And as somebody else pointed out to me, this has been, ever since we left the EU, we've had no controls. How many people have been smuggled in the backs of lorries that have not been checked? I mean, why get on a boat if you can just get in the back of a lorry? Could well be thousands and thousands for all we know. Look at the queues at Dover. Massive queues. I read somewhere yesterday that one couple were waiting 15 hours in a queue to Dover. A lot of people waiting sort of 6-9 hours. Nothing to do with Brexit. Nothing to do with the fact there are now controls. Everybody's passport has to be looked at to see if you've spent too many days in the EU in the past 6 months. No, there's nothing to do with that. Massive queues. And the funny thing is that we know that later this year, the EU are going to bring in facial recognition and fingerprint controls, so that every single person going through is going to have to get out of their car. They can't do it in the car. Get out of their car, go to a booth somewhere, and have their face scanned, fingerprints scanned, and the passport scanned. And if you've got a coach load of 60 people, every one of those 60 is going to have to get out. And in the meantime, the coach will be in the queue. There's very little parking at Dover. Those queues will be back up to Canterbury. But no do Brexit. Interest rates up again. More problems for people with mortgages. A lot of people are going to find it difficult or impossible. A lot of people must be extremely worried. A lot of people are a lot poorer. There's a lot less money in circulation. That's going to affect all businesses. Up and up and up. We've got higher inflation and higher interest rates than the whole of Europe. Jeremy Hunt was interviewed about it by Christian Gurumurti from Channel 4 News. And when he was asked if it was anything to do with Brexit, he said no, he got quite irritated about it. It's nothing to do with Brexit. The reason is, and I heard Grant Shapps come up with this later on, this is now the official response to why we're doing so much worse than Europe. We have a tighter labour market. It's nothing to do with Europe. No, Brexit. Nothing to do with Brexit, no. Nothing to do with the fact that 1 million workers went home when Brexit happened. No. Tighter labour market. If we weren't quite so hostile to immigration, the market might not be quite so tight. If we didn't have 200,000 people waiting for a decision of the Home Office, almost all of whom will get a favourable decision, if we let some of them work, we might not have quite such a tight labour market. And let's do this from the FT. Now, the FT is a newspaper you can't rely on. They don't ever print anything that isn't thoroughly checked and right. And this is from an article in the FT, and it said that their statistician said that the average living standards in the UK are now below those of the former Warsaw Pact countries. That's places like Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary. Our average living standards are below those in those countries. And for the lower demographics, that's poorer people, they are 20% lower. I must say I found that absolutely astonishing. They say we've become a poor country with some very rich people. In fact, we have more millionaires and billionaires than any other country in Europe. I think I have a friend who I see every couple of weeks. I have a coffee with him, and he lives in Kensington in a really very expensive area of London. And we sit and have a coffee and look out the window and watch the cars go by. And it's quite extraordinary. We were looking the other day, the number of big, expensive cars, I'm talking about very big Mercedes and Rolls Royces and Bentleys and the occasional Lamborghini that go on, and just the amount of wealth, obvious wealth that's there. And throughout central London, right opposite this where my friend lives, there's a row of houses. I think I mentioned them once before. About 15 or 20 houses, and they're these tall white terraced houses that you see in pictures of London. They're all about 10 or 12 million pounds each, and as he says, he's never seen lights on in almost all of them. About 2 or 3 of those houses ever have lights on in them. The rest of them all been bought by investors from abroad. Probably dirty money, probably money perhaps transferred from some of our British tax havens all over the world. It's crazy. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of luxury properties throughout London that are just investments. And there's so much wealth there. And that's the sort of wealth amongst which these MPs and ministers circulate. It's a completely different world from what people are experiencing outside of London and the country at large. And I think as people get to realise this huge gap between the very rich and the majority, I think people's anger is going to increase. You can only squeeze a population so far. I mean, there comes a point where something has to happen. We all say that, if any of this was happening in France, there'd have been riots in the streets for ages ago. And people say that, we don't have a riot here. Well, we did have the poll tax riots, didn't we? And I think sooner or later something's going to happen. I don't think you can just go on, with this grinning Sunak rushing around telling everybody everything is wonderful and everything is fantastic and so on, and all these people lying and lying and lying. And the evidence to everyone is that things are getting worse and worse and worse. Just a couple of other things. Last week, we were going to have our own product standards mark, weren't we? The UKCA mark to replace the CE mark. I think I think the idea was that that post Brexit there would be 4 major economic blocks in the world. There'd be China with their 1.4 billion, and there'd be America with their 330 million, and there'd be the EU with their 500 million. There'd be us with our 67 million, and we're all going to be sort of shoulder to shoulder. And our UKCA mark, having taken back control, was going to be a major standard in the world. But as it is, we're going to carry on using the CE mark, and we just have to except, well, not exactly take back control, is it? Sunak hasn't said whether or not he's going to sign Horizon. Scientists are all desperate for that to happen, but he may not. It's up to him. And so we're in this dreadful mess with this so much denial going on amongst the politicians, so much incompetence at the top, and this slide into poverty that we're experiencing in the nation, whilst the rest of the world looks on in wonder. And I think before very long, I mean, the only people, I think Sunak is clever enough to realise that Brexit was a disaster. You know, previously he's always said I think he said incredibly proud of Brexit. That's what his expression in the past. In this radio interview the other day, he said, with Nick Ferrari, he said, and I'll quote, he said, and it was sort of an aside, he said, I supported Brexit and I still think it was the right thing to do. Far, far, far from being convincing. He still thinks it's the right thing to do, even though everybody else doesn't and everybody can see it isn't. He knows it's a failure. I think also he knows, whilst he sat on holiday in California, he knows that he's not going to sort this out. He probably won't even stop the small boats. Well, he definitely won't stop the small boats, but he probably won't. None of his pledges is he going to deliver on. And I think he knows he's pretty unpopular. I think, like, for example, when he went to that beer festival and he was heckled, and I think he realises that it's a pretty miserable gig. And I don't think, I think he almost certainly regrets being Prime Minister and probably would like to be well out of it. I frankly wouldn't be at all surprised if he doesn't decide to have an early election, because from the point of view of the Tories, it was the best possible thing they could do. Just dump the whole mess on Labour and then start grumbling about them not sorting it out. And Labour won't last 10 minutes. Because right now, the only people in this country who believe in this very hard Brexit that we're experiencing, the only people who believe in it and can make it work, are a lot of utterly stupid people who believe that it's quite worth losing everything and becoming a poor laughingstock of the world if you get back your sovereignty, not having a clue as to what sovereignty is that they got back. It's a whole crowd of people like that who will never be persuaded, and Keir Starmer, and that's it. So for the Tories, have a quick election now in the spring and let Labour have a stab, blame them for everything, and then sail back in next time. And I would have thought, as I say, Sunak's out in California now enjoying himself. He's probably taking his children to their new school when he gets sacked. And I think he's probably, if he could find any way of getting out of it, he probably would do. And I don't think he'd be at all disappointed if his term as Prime Minister came to an end for whatever reason. Anyway, that's what I think about it. And if you watch this far, thank you very much as always. And if you haven't already subscribed, I'd be very, very grateful. And until next week, bye for now.